Okay. By the way, the second book just arrived at my house today. We have copies ready to go. Okay. But today we're going to be doing page 404. What happens? What happens? After midnight, Will Blair, who had been hiding in the jungle, snuck back to the campus before his invisibility spell wore off and tubed his way secretly back to his room. He sent a message to Samid and waited impatiently for his friend to answer his blackboard, but to no avail. Finally, he gave up and decided to go it alone. Abandoning his 3D door failure and no longer needing it, he sat in his room, surrounded by sketches of Alex Stowe. As if in a creepy sort of shrine, he concentrated for a few minutes, breathed deeply, and crossed his fingers. With all his might, he focused on theatrical thoughts of becoming his character, until his body and features transformed into the body of the person he'd been studying for nearly a year. Then he hoped against hope. He hoped against hope that he wouldn't bump into Alex on the way out of Arteme, because that would indeed ruin everything. The little dragon picture there. He strolled down the steps in the same manner as Alex would stroll, and when he passed Florence and Cimber, he nodded like Alex would nod. Cimber growled, "Alex," and nodded in return. Will made his way to the gaping space in the wall and nodded to the Gyranos there. Tina asked in a frightened voice, "Where are you going?" Will didn't want to tell the nosy Gyranos anything, so he simply waved and set out on his quest to reach Wanted University before he was discovered. When Mr. Today got word that Alex, or someone looking suspiciously like him, had left Arteme, he whirled around to check the blackboards and then flew to the tube across from his office, shimmered, and disappeared. Hours later, he returned, exhausted and empty-handed. By morning, there were two announcements written on the blackboards. First, the Quilitary, which had been preparing for this moment for so long, was already on the march. And second, Alex Stowe had gone into Quill during the night and never returned. Alex sputtered as he read the second. What, Clive? Is this your idea of a joke? The board rippled in shiny black waves as Clive's face pressed through. He smiled grimly. "It's tempting, but I didn't do it. I've already alerted Marcus that you are here." He mumbled something about Tina making the report down by the gate, and Will Blair using a disguise spell. Alex clapped his hand to his forehead. "Oh no, Clive, you gotta send out a notice that it's not true." His stomach clenched, wondering if Will had already killed Aaron. But there was no time to think about it now. "On the way," it popped up. "The previous message regarding Alex Stowe was inaccurate. Please disregard." Alex sighed in relief. "Oh, thanks, Clive. You're not half bad, you know that?" Clive smirked. Well, I'd hate to have you go off to battle and get killed without me at least doing one decent thing for you. You know, karma. Wow, how big of you. Read your instructions. You don't have much time. Clive melted into the blackboard. Don't die, he called out as his face disappeared and the announcements appeared on the screen again. I'll try not to, Alex whispered. He pressed the first announcement and read. Alex Stowe. The Quilitary is on the march. Your breakfast has been tubed to you. Please report to your squad on the lawn immediately. Your commander is Simber. He will have your orders. Thank you for your dedication and service to Arteme. You are a valuable part of our community. Marcus today. Alex picked up the tray of food from the tube and ate quickly, and then he washed and dressed. He grabbed his component vest. He grabbed his component vest, checked the bulging pockets for all his magical items, and slipped his arms through it. 10 minutes later, he joined the throngs of Artemians, easily found Simber, and stood near him. He felt a lot less scared knowing that Simber was there to lead his group. Megan joined him. I'm so glad you're here. I thought you did something stupid, she whispered. She eyed the cheetah nervously. And I'm really glad he's on our side. Simber growled. I can hear you, Ranger. They were soon joined by 3 others, a young man named Peter, an old woman named Pauline, and a rather large white squirrelicorn named Rufus. Feel free to draw a white squirrelicorn for us at any point in your language book. Thank you. Across the lawn, he saw Samid and Lanny under the leadership of Araya, the Girino. He waved and watched Lanny's anxious face relax. She ran over to him, pressed a note in his hand, and said, What was up with the report about you? Alex just shrugged and shook his head. Lanny glanced back at Araya and ran back to her post. Alex caught Samid's eye. Samid had a strained look on his face. He nodded slightly to Alex, and then he dropped his gaze. I wonder if he knows about Will, Alex whispered under his breath, and if he's really on our side. He knows now, growled Simber. As for the other, I guess we'll find out soon enough. Alex startled. Oh, I gotta start remembering that you can see and hear so well, he said. The great cheetah chuckled under his breath. I prefer knowing what you're up to, Stowe. At that moment, Mr. Today and Claire Morning appeared on the rooftop of the mansion. Claire clapped her hands for order, and all in front turned to hush those behind and direct their attention to the leaders. Commanders, please give your orders and take your stations. The Quilitary is in sight. Alex and Megan gulped simultaneously and exchanged a nervous glance. Alex quickly peeked at the note from Lanny. It read, Die 1,000 deaths. He looked up alarmed and searched for Lanny, but she was nowhere to be found. What a horrible thing to say, he thought, shoving the note in his pocket. I thought she was over being immature. He straightened his vest, going over the various components one more time, even though he knew their locations by heart. Peter and Pauline whispered together. Rufus rose up on his haunches as Simber faced them. Our squad was specially designed to complement one another, he began. Rufus is agile. He can both climb and fly. His eyesight is tremendous, as is his bite and skewer. Simber indicated the squirrelicorn's foot-long horn, which grew from between his little squirrel ears. Pauline was a theater focus. Peter's a writing instructor. Megan is a musician. And Alex is a painter. He paused and said wryly, and in case you didn't notice, I'm an enormous stone cheetah with wings. I come with a major drawback. I am not easy to hide. Therefore, our squad will be an open moving target, but our combined skills should overcome most obstacles. Please follow my instructions at all times, especially when we face combat. Trust my orders. From my vantage point, I can see much farther than you, and because of my experience as a predator, you should trust my instincts. Any questions? He looked at the five who faced him. None had questions. All right, we're the front line, stationed at the road in Quill. Simber turned and walked toward the opening in the wall. The front line? A chill of fear moved through Alex as they approached the place where the gate once stood. It had been one thing to go from Mr. Today's office into Aaron's dormitory room, but it was quite another to face this ominous, fateful entrance again after nearly a year, and then to stand outside it to take the brunt of the attack. It was completely nerve-wracking. Simber held his head high as he walked nobly, like a prince through the wide opening. Mr. Today, who now stood at the entrance, murmured words of protection on each of their component vests as they passed through into the bleakness of Quill. The words of protection will last the entire day. Please don't take your vests off. They will help keep you safe. The man put his hands down on Alex's arm and whispered, Do you remember the command I used for the glass wall? Alex, whose heart was pounding by now, nodded. You are capable of casting that, Alex. You are capable of a lot of things. Just be aware that it will shatter if it's struck hard enough, so it's not permanent. Above all, have confidence in yourself, and you will succeed. Control your emotions, and you will hit every time. Yes, sir, Alex whispered, feeling confident from the pep talk. He nodded and followed Simber onto the dusty road to stand and wait for the Quill-Tire vehicles. There was nothing in this desolate part of Quill that could be used for cover except for a few scattered posts that held up the barbed wire ceiling. Alex breathed in the stifling air of Quill, his eyes darting around, feeling very exposed. Other squads lined up behind and alongside Simber's, and soon there were over 100 defenders in place inside Quill, ready to face the oncoming Quillitary. Alex could hear the other squads behind him talking through their plans. The majority of the defenders remained in Arteme, spread out to protect the mansion, hidden behind the lush foliage, and grouped under cover along the edge of the jungle. It would be easier to fight in Arteme, where the Quilitary would be in unfamiliar territory, and so shocked at the sight that they would have a disadvantage. Soon the squealing and squeaking vehicles could be heard. Alex and Megan stood tall, trying to catch the first glimpse, almost like little eager children of Arteme, who could hear a marching band, but not yet see the approaching parade. Just inside the opening into Arteme, Alex could see Samid and Lanny's squad waiting. Alex caught Lanny's eye, and when she smiled, his stomach flip-flopped. Despite her mean note, he mouthed the words, "Be safe." Lanny bit her lip and nodded. "You too," she whispered. They did not have long to wait. A fleet of rust-colored vehicles, flanked on both sides by endless lines of marching soldiers, thundered closer. They raised no weapons. Slowly the vehicles came to a stop in front of the entrance to Arteme. They faced Simber head-on. When they came to a halt, a burly man stood up inside the front vehicle, his head and shoulders well above the windshield. He squinted as the colors of Arteme bled through the opening in the wall. Samid recognized the man as General Blair. "Attention, worthless unwanteds. I have a message for Alexander Stowe," he yelled. Simber growled angrily. Alex felt his heart drop and splatter on the road. After a moment, Simber nodded to Alex and growled in a low voice, "Step forward and claim it." All the squads inside Arteme, who could see through the opening, watched the scene unfold. Alex's breath was shallow, and his teeth nearly chattered together. He stepped forward as bravely as he could, cleared his throat, and said in his deepest, harshest voice, "I'm Alex Stowe." The general stared him in the eye for a long moment, his upper lip frozen in a sneer. Alex stared back unflinching. The message is from the high priest Justine." He cleared his throat authoritatively. Alex didn't move. "The high priest Justine thanks you for the warning you gave to Aaron Stowe 2 nights ago." As the general spoke, 2 Quilitary officers in the seat behind him hoisted something long and bulky over their heads. "She only wished that this," the general said, as the officers flung the object into the grassy opening of Arteme, "had truly been you." On the ground, inside a sheet of thin, ragged linen, was the lifeless body of the general's own son, Will Blair. Now, just think about that for a second. Write it down in your book. This is the general over here. He just threw his own son out in a bag onto the ground. I'm guessing the general, I wonder how the general feels right now. If you could just write down for me what you think the general feels like. Because I doubt he feels too hot right now, you know?